name is Tom. I'm a Bubble developer. I'm working with Bubble since 2020, so for over 3 years, 3 years now. But my history in IT is much more longer. I started in 2000 when I started my first company. It was a company where we created websites for other companies. It wasn't that popular 24 years ago. Then we changed the name to the Internet Software House, creating software on demand using internet browsers. It wasn't also that popular. And the company was growing. In 2012, we merged into the bigger group. We had over 200 developers on board. And in 2014, I left the company. I sold my shares, and starting from 2016, I moved to the startup industry, creating something smaller, something from scratch. For example, in 2016, we started an AI company called Edward, an AI assistant. It was in the days where no one heard about, the chat GPTs and so on. And now I'm in the no-code business, so I think it's a good predictor because I'm always before the big boom. And yeah, my no-code adventure started in 2020 when the pandemic started, and our previous business was, I mean, it wasn't a shutdown, but the target group was shut down in homes. It was targeted for the field sales representatives. So as you know, during the pandemics, they were shut down in home. And then I found this book. A friend of mine told me about this book, Make Bootstrapper's Handbook, and it completely blow my mind about how to start businesses, how to run businesses, because previously I was also creating a huge team, huge technical teams, and this changed everything. And this is also how I found Bubble, and I started learning Bubble, started doing my first project. This is my no-code adventure. And I started doing simple projects, and then I've moved to creating my startup, which was called Cluey. And firstly, it was designed for all the freelancers and small companies to manage their business. It has all of the possible modules, including invoicing, task, project management, customers, time tracking, and so on and so on. Of course, no one was buying it because it was too general. I was redesigning it because the first version was before the responsive Bubble responsive design even started. So then I was redesigning it. It was working and was looking beautifully. But again, it has all the reporting thing and so on. Again, no one was buying it. And yeah, about a year ago, where we were chatting with my friend Miguel, he came up with an idea. Hey, how about doing something for the no-coders, something for the no-code developers, doing the thing that will track their time spent on their no-code projects. I said, hey, I've got all of this just to narrow it down to create a niche. And yeah, this is how the current Cluey was born. I mean, the project to automatically track time spent on your no-code project. And yeah, so this is a short intro about me and about what I'm doing. And this is the project I would like to tell you more about, because it was built not only on Bubble, but also on XANO. Why XANO? Well, I will try to tell you more during the presentation. When we talk about XANO, I mean, in general, about connecting an external backend to Bubble, we think about the scalability. But the truth is that if you are thinking about only the scalability, maybe it's not the right approach, because we all know that we've got the workflow units, right? The workflow units are now calculated, and you're paying not only the monthly fee, but also the workflow units. But if you calculate the workflow units and the amount of workflow units you need, you may end up with a conclusion that you can choose the lowest plan and buy 2 million of workflow units and pay around $300 for an app that will handle a lot of traffic. So I'm telling you this because when you're thinking about the scalability, the first thing you should think about is how to optimize your Bubble app. then how to buy an extra workflow units if it's possible, and then eventually move to XANO, because doing Bubble with XANO is much more complicated than having everything in one place. I like to have everything in one place, so I always start with doing everything in Bubble. But the most important thing with workflow units is that sometimes you can end up with something like this. This is a post from Sarah, that sometimes you may mess up with some backend workflows or some workflow, and your app suddenly will hit um, will hit the overages, and if you didn't turn on the overages, you may end up with a bill of a few $1,000s. Of course, Bubble will handle the first fuck up like this, but the second and another, no. So yeah. So when I'm thinking about combining Bubble with an external backend like XANO, I'm thinking not more about the scalability, but about the predictability. So you're able to predict the costs, because the Bubble will be on the flat fee and XANO will be on the flat fee. Right? For now, XANO is not charging you for units, right? So we are paying just one monthly fee. And yeah, so this is XANO. I found XANO. I must say that I found XANO while I was working on Cluey, and right after Bubble introduced the new workflow units plan, because I found out that it won't be cost effective for the type of project like this. What is XANO? Basically a no-code backend development platform, so completely different from Bubble. If you are used to the Bubble interface, you have to learn XANO from scratch. But on the other hand, if you're a traditional dev working with databases, you will love XANO, because XANO is nothing more like a Postgres database with an interface on it and ability to create APIs very fast, and connect those APIs to your database and to your front ends. And yeah, this is the XANO interface. This is how it looks like. I won't describe all the sections, but basically it relies on data which lies in database, and APIs where you can design your APIs using included functions like in Bubble. So we've got a number of built-in functions related with data manipulation, security, data caching, content upload, and so on and so on. And also some custom functions available on the marketplace, and being to be able to build by yourself. So you may think about the XANO like workflow tab in Bubble, but powered up with the community of people who are creating some extra functions on the marketplace, and much more possibilities in terms of data manipulation. Starting from the simple thing called loops, which we don't have in Bubble, as we know. Right. So yeah. So this is how XANO looks like in general. And when we are thinking about how to prepare the architecture of an app, of a Bubble app working with XANO, we can start with the beginning, with the scratch, right? So this is a typical architecture of a Bubble app, where we have a backend API and a data API, which is able to which is accessible by external apps. By adding XANO, you are switching the layer of data APIs and connecting the external apps to XANO. So in this architecture, the Bubble serves as a front end for the data. Of course, we can combine both. For example, we can set up some connections to Bubble and XANO, or use XANO only as the data behind, and all the other API connections will stay in Bubble. So the combinations of those is of course possible. And to connect to XANO, I mean, we can connect to XANO in several ways. Firstly, of course, the API connector built in Bubble. But this doesn't solve the problem of the workflow units, because if we are using the API connector on the backend, each API called XANO also consumes the workflow units. So instead, we can use the plugin by Li called XANO connector. So if you are not using, you definitely should try. It allows you to connect to XANO using JS SDK. So all the communication between Bubble and XANO is handled on the front end. So no workflow units consumed, and you are totally safe in terms of the cost of the workflow units, because all the data is handled on the front end through JavaScript library. Yeah. And how about some possible use cases? The first possible use case for this type of approach is that you can have one centralized backend with the users and the data in XANO, and separate frontends. So you can start with Bubble, but for example, if you would like to connect a mobile app, or would like to connect another no-code frontend, or even the code frontend, for example, the separate app, you can do it by simply connecting to XANO. So in this use case, Bubble will serve as one of the frontend connected to the XANO app. Another thing is the GDPR issues, because here in Europe, I'm from Poland. When you are working with enterprises, when you are working with big companies, they often require you to keep the data in Europe, right? So you are not able to serve the data to put the data of the users outside the Europe. As we know, Bubble doesn't allow you to choose the data location. I mean, it allows only if you're on the enterprise, but we are speaking about the typical plans. So what you can basically do, you can separate the front end and the backend using this XANO connector plugin, and you can keep all the data in XANO and choose the region whenever you want, right? So you can choose the location, for example, in Europe, or any location you want. But you have to remember that all the for the data not to touch Bubble servers, you need to use these front-end calls and this XANO connector. So this is another example use case where XANO can be used. Of course, when we are speaking about the backend, no-code backends that you can connect to Bubble, XANO is not all. For example, we got Supabase, right? It's the open source Firebase alternative, which can cost 0 because it's open source. But the thing is that compared to XANO, when you are using the Supabase, you need to be more fluent in the code, right? It's not the typical no-code solution. It's basically the same, right? The Postgres database, where you are able to connect through API. But in XANO, you've got all the built-in functions that you can use the graphical user interface to connect with. In Supabase, you have to write it on your own, as well as the SQL queries. So again, it can be used, but if you would like to use Supabase, you need to be more mature in terms of databases, in terms of code. It's not the typical no-code. So this is why I love XANO and love Bubble and this combination. But for example, you can use Supabase in connection with XANO as a backup database for your data, because in terms of costs, it may be more effective. For example, you've got a huge log tables, or you need to back up your data constantly. You can create a connection between XANO and Supabase, and in this type of architectures, Supabase will serve as a backup database for your apps. Yeah. So this was the short introduction about what's possible, what's not. I don't know if you get, yeah. So I will answer this question from Uri about the possible security issues from XANO connector. The data gets stored on the browser. I mean, the only thing that it's stored on the browser is the token, the authorization token. That and with that token you are allowed to log into to XANO user, but it's stored on the browser of the user. So if you set up the token expiry, for example, 1 hour or 24 hours, there's no security issue for that. Of course, all the calls are being set by browser. So if someone wants to, do the inspect, he will be able to see all the calls that are being sent to XANO. He won't able, to recreate it without the authorization and so on, but he will able to see what calls are being sent to XANO. So it's it's that type of security issue, if you may call it like that. Yeah. But if you are speaking about the visibility, Bubble exposes so many things that if, if you are familiar with Bubble and you're okay with Bubble, you shouldn't be worried about the XANO connector. XANO has also much more possibilities in terms of securing your backend. And yeah, I will tell you more about this in the other parts of the presentation. Yeah, and the thing about the real-time data, yeah, I will also talk about that on the real examples. Basically, it's slightly different than Bubble, right? It doesn't have the real-time connections, so you need to fetch the data and refresh the data if you want to have the real-time data. It's not the same experience as we are get used to Bubble, right? Where we change something and it's constantly instantly change on the front end. If you need to have this type of experience, you can check the Supabase, because Supabase has this type of connection that allows this type of fix. Alrighty, my way. So a case study of Cluey and why I chosen XANO, why I chosen to use XANO. So when we first spoke about the tracking time in Bubble, tracking time in no code, I've set up this simple landing page. The project was called Bubble Time, to easily keep track of hours work on no code projects. I've created a simple Chrome extension because the whole project is based on Chrome extension. And this Chrome extension has really simple idea. I mean, it was fetching all the URLs you were using. And as we know, when you are in Bubble editor, you can extract all the information about what's happening from the URL. I mean, the tab you are in, the data you're working on, and so on and so on. So extracting these URLs and sending it to Bubble database. So simple, effective, and yeah. So I've created a data types in Bubble. One of them was called timer, and the timer has the URL that you've been working on it, start date and date and end date, and duration seconds. So from this, I thought I will be able to get all the information about what was happening in your Bubble editor and present it on the dashboard. So this Chrome extension was taking all these URLs. So when you are switching through tabs, when you are switching through Bubble editor, the URL changes. Every URL change caused the tracker to send the URL to Bubble database, and it was stored in this timer. And yeah, so I thought it was a great idea, and it will be great to launch it with a number of users. But then I started calculating things. So when I want to have real data, and we as Bubble developers, we like to switch between tabs quite often. For example, when you are instantly clicking on the tabs, So each minute you can have 30 URL changes, right? When we multiply it by minutes, you can have over 1,000 URLs per hour. When we multiply it by hours, for example, 5 hours a day, we can have 9,000 URL changes a day. And 15 days a month, we have 135,000 URL changes a month. If you are working 15 days a month, 5 hours a day. So if you're, if you are a hard user, if you're a typical developer, that's nothing unusual. But just per user per month. So for 100 users, I will have over 1.5 million records only for 1 month. And for the app to make it sustainable, I will need to have a couple of thousands of users, not 100. Yeah. So and then during that, the new workflow units the pricing were discovered, and I was starting to think about how to cope with workload usage, because the workload will be killing me if I will do it with this approach. And the other thing is the data processing, right? Because if we have the Bubble URL combined with all these parameters and so on, we have to remember that sending this URL to the server is one thing, and processing, getting information about the details, it's the other thing, right? So of course, it can be processed through the extension, but I wanted also to add some other no-code editors and react to some changes on quite fast. For example, if Bubble will change the parameters, the URLs, changing it in the extension and publishing new extension can take a couple of days. And for this couple of days, users won't be able to use it, so it made no sense. So all the data processing is being held on the backend. So yeah, so this is why I chose XANO. Firstly, because of the data processing, and then because about the workflow usage. So this is the current usage of the app for the last month. Of course, it's much more optimized than the first idea, so I'm not keeping up all these records. So it's only have 1,200,000 records, but a lot of API requests, as you see, and a lot of background tasks run. So it's for 1 month. And when we take a look at the load of the server, see, it's below 10. So it's still got the capacity to grow more, and it's on the lowest XANO plan, so it costs around $80 a month. Of course, to do that, I need to do a lot of job in terms of optimizing also the database, the structure, and so on and so on. But it's capable of handling much more. Yeah. So the architecture, starting with XANO. All the APIs are being handled on the XANO side. So all the data and the data connection is in XANO. The Chrome extension is communicating directly with XANO. So the authorization and the tokens between Chrome extension and XANO. And then I've added the front end, which is in Bubble. And this front end, of course, is using the XANO connector. So all the data handling, all the data processing is in the backend, and also all of the integrations are moved to XANO. So for example, OpenAI, because to summarize some things and send emails to users, I'm using OpenAI's and loops. So for some logging and backups, all the things are being held in XANO. So I have one data source for all of the things. And it also allows me to get new ideas and connect new things. So for example, couple of days ago, I've launched the no-code leaderboard. So for all the people who are in no-code and would like to compare between each others. and are using Cluey, I launched a separate website on Bubble, also connected with XANO backend, this time through API connector, because it doesn't have a lot of calls. And all this setup with the backend was done in 1 weekend. So, you know, connecting new front ends, it's when you have the backend in XANO, it's pretty simple. Alrighty, so this is how I did it. Now I would like to show you some editor things, or maybe you have some questions. If you have some questions, just feel free to ask, and if not, I will move to the editor. Alrighty, so maybe starting with XANO, right? So this is the backend of XANO, of course, on not on the real data. This is the development data. So a lot of tables, because you know, I started with the with tasks, with timers and tracking time, but Cluey has much more functionality, especially for no-code agencies who like to work with teams. So the central thing is this timer, right? So this timer handles all the information about time tracked. The timers are combined. Maybe I will. Yeah. Okay. The timers are combined into sessions. Where are sessions? Yeah, sessions. So sessions are the browser tabs. So we are tracking the information, what was happening in each browser tab, and then what was happening in that browser using timers. I've got a number of tables, for example, days. Not to fetch information from timers to constantly. Basically, timers is the table that handles all the information, but if I want to gather information, I process them daily, put them, for example, in days. In days, we have a breakdown of all the days that you've been working on and the time spent during these days. And this day table is much more smaller than timers. So if you want to present some data on the dashboard, we are using basically these days or sessions. Only if we want to go really deep, go deeper, we are using these timers, but it's not too often, right? If your user wants to download all his data, we are also using these timers. And what's also interesting is the timers history table, right? Because again, the timers is the table that is being written by the Chrome extension very often. If it's too big, it's not very effective, you know, to work on the big tables. So from time to time, I am rewriting all the things to timers history. So if you want to get any information about what happened, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or a month ago, everything is in the timer history, not in the timers. And of course, all the things related with users, teams, and so on also is here. What's interesting from the perspective of XANO, that you can have several API groups, and each group can have its own endpoints. So, for example, this group is the group that handles endpoints for the app, and it's being communicated by Bubble. This endpoint is being communicated by leaderboard, so by the API of a leaderboard, and it has only the aggregates of the data that is being presented on the leaderboard. This API is the user API, so each user can have its own authorization key and get the information from this API. So yeah, so this is basically how it's done here. And from the Bubble app perspective, if we go into the Bubble app, what I can say, it's not the perfect, the perfect build that I'm proud of, because it started as an MVP and then I was adding more and more layers. So you shouldn't, you shouldn't take example from this. It has no reusables, everything on dashboards. So this is how you shouldn't design the web pages, right? The apps in Bubble, but yeah, that doesn't matter. Basically, we've got the main group with the content, and in the content we've got all the pages, like for example the dashboard. Yeah. And when we are using XANO and XANO connector, we are communicating with XANO through the virtual objects created by API. Let me show you how it works. So when you go into the plugins, of course, you've got let's take time to load. Yeah, of course, we got the XANO connector, but the more important thing is the API connector. Because if you are using XANO connector, you need to create something what is called the virtual API calls that represents your API responses. So for example, XANO timers, right? You don't have any API call here, but you are putting the data that you are getting from XANO here in the API response. So then Bubble converts it into the Bubble object, and you can refer it like a normal Bubble object, right? So when we are going to design, and when we, for example, time spent by day, see, it's using type of content called XANO day. It's this virtual API object, but handled by XANO connector. I will go to the repeating group. Yeah. And it's getting data from the XANO query days element. And the XANO query days is I've got it all there. This is basically the connection to XANO. See, so these are the elements from API connector. You've got XANO query, so to query data from XANO, XANO get to get a single element from data, and XANO action. So you have to put those elements on the page and then refer to that element to fetch information or to use XANO actions. So for example, to display the time spent by day, I'm doing it like a normal Bubble element in the repeating group, referring to XANO query days, the data fetched from XANO. Then I'm using some filters on the front end. So it's pretty similar to work with XANO connector, because it maps all the objects from and the responses. You can map all the objects and responses from XANO to Bubble. And from the perspective of designing the Bubble app, you do it just like a normal Bubble app. And I will also show you the actions. So for example, adding the projects. Where is it? The pop. Yeah, let's say edit tasks. Yeah. So when we go into the workflows, see? So instead of, for example, creating thing using the action create thing in Bubble, I'm triggering XANO action tasks. And this is the endpoint called task in XANO with these parameters. So I'm sending, instead of calling the function of Bubble, I'm calling the XANO action task with the element with this endpoint and with these parameters. So if I will, in Bubble, I will use, create thing, right? The data thing, create a new thing. In the XANO connector, I'm triggering XANO action task, and I have the endpoint in XANO. I will switch to XANO now, called task. I will show you that Where is it here? Post. Yeah. Task record is authentication required. That means that user needs to authenticate, and this is this workflow. So all the logic is here. See here, I am adding the record in the database. So basically, this action create thing is here in XANO and creating thing in the XANO database, and it's getting the information from the API, from the inputs, and adding the record in the database and responding with the added record. So this is how you handle things with this XANO connector. And if you would like not to use XANO connector, you can of course use the typical API connector, which is even simpler, right? This is the complicated way, using the XANO connector, right? So maybe I will show you how it works on front. See, this is I will show you how it works on front end if I'm logged in. I think I am. Yeah. Yeah. So this is fetching data from XANO. It works. Yeah, it works pretty fast if I click on the app. Yeah. And all this data is being fetched from XANO in real time. Yeah, again, Michael, you were asking about the real-time data. For example, it sometimes right now it sometimes will change in the database. It won't reflect it here on the dashboard. So if you want to do it, you need to from time to time refresh the data. The XANO connector has the built-in auto refresh, but it works that if you switch from the other tab to this tab, it will refresh. So there's a preloader if it refreshes in XANO. So this is how the refreshing works. Yep, and the last but not least, I will also show you the leaderboard. The no-code leaderboard is the project. Basically, it's another front-end no-code leaderboard. It's another front-end for the Cluey app. Again, fetching data from XANO, and this is also it uses the same database. And the thing is that you have seen that it took around 1 second to fetch the data, but it's fetching the data for all the users for the last year. So a lot of data. But in XANO you can use caching, you can use optimization, and it's really fast. I will refresh it. This is Bubble, this is XANO. Now it's loaded. So yeah, so very fast. And here I'm not using XANO connector, but the typical API connector, and it's fetching all the information about the activity of the users and also the ranking of the users without the details. Who's first today? Brenton, right? Brenton is, yes, he's the top Bubble developer. I'm the 9th on the list, and yeah. And from the Bubble app perspective, yeah, so this is super simple app. So it's fetching the chart and also this this ranking in the repeating group, and I'm using the API connector endpoint called user ranking. And I'm not using any plugins except of API connector, and here I've got the user ranking. See, the from to time and stamp, and so on and so on. So yeah, so this is the simpler way to connecting with XANO, but the thing is that it consumes workflow units. So if you are not worried about the workflow units, but you just want to improve your capabilities of handling data and so on, you should use the typical API connector. Yep. What else? Yeah, this no-code leaderboard. So guys, if you want to join, you can do it. It's for free. You can try how to the experience of how the whole app is being built. You can scan the QR code or go to nocodeLeaderboard.com, because we are building the leaderboard of the top no code developers. So yeah, so I'm convincing you to join and sign up the no code leaderboard. And yeah, if you'd like to stay in touch, here's my contact information. You can fill up the form or get my calendar directly, my email, my Twitter. If you have any questions, please ask me. I will try to answer all of them.